All right, so welcome everyone. We are so glad to have you all here with us today. I'm Rhonda Henry. I'm one of the therapists at the Health and Wellness Program here on campus. And I'm joined by my colleague, Kim Relaford, who is another of the therapists in the Health and Wellness Program. And I know some of you may have been at some of the previous sessions. This is number 4 in our 4-part series about healthy relationships. Today, we're going to be talking about relationships at work. Slide. Thanks, Kim. And a couple things that we just want to point out kind of in the agenda. This is sort of what you can expect from the hour with us. So if you've seen some of the past programs, you know, we kind of get this grounded in those vision and values, kind of speaking on core values. We're going to talk about those healthy work relationship skills. Just like in any relationships in our lives, there's a skill set to keeping relationships healthy and functional and moving in a good direction and managing sometimes some of the problems that come up. We're going to be talking about communication and boundary skills, managing conflict, and then talking in the end kind of about resources, next steps, and where you'll be getting materials and things from us and sort of a plan for that. All right, next slide. A couple of things we want to mention about what we're not going to be talking about for just a moment. Can we go back one, Kim?
I'm sorry.
That's all right. There we go. A couple of things that we wanted to point out that we are not going to be covering today. So this is very much focused on how do we build healthy relationships? What can we as individuals do with other individuals in our groups? But we know sometimes there are issues that can come up in work relationships that need outside support or outside intervention. Those are kind of bigger than what we're going to have time to adequately cover in this hour. And so some of the things we're not going to be touching on are going to be situations where things like sexual misconduct, bullying, discrimination come up. Other kind of inappropriate behaviors, things that are maybe aggressive, alcohol or drug use, things that kind of in a nutshell aren't going to be solved by two people. It's going to probably need outside intervention or some outside support to manage the bigger issue. We've linked a couple of the resources on campus there at the bottom of this. We've got the Office for Institutional Equity and Equal Opportunity, as well as employee relations are linked there. And this is also a space where if you're experiencing any of these things or concerned about this, it may be appropriate to the therapist, either Kim or I or someone else for individual counseling to talk through those things in a little bit more detail. All right. With that, Kim, I'll turn it over
Thank
to
you.
you.
Okay, thank you, Rhonda. So, I'm so glad you all are here. It's been really amazing to see us have more people join all the time at each session. And so we are so glad to know that what we're talking about really resonates with folks. And I think I've said this in another session, but relationships at the core of everything. And so understanding and learning how to navigate relationships and be a good friend or partner or family member or work or coworker is just as important as having those in our lives. So as we have done in all of our other sessions, we're going to start by talking a little bit about core values. I'm going to talk about this a little bit differently, and there is lots of information about core values in our other presentations, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about what core values are, but I do want to talk about how they apply to work, because work relationships are so important, and understanding that what our purpose and our direction, our goals are not even just as individuals, but are the purpose and direction and goals? What are the core values of our employment, our job, our team? What are those is just as important, because we have to understand how our core values interact with the mission and goals of our agency or of our employer. But why are work relationships important? So I have a couple of things I want to share with you. So the Gallup organization, most people are familiar with Gallup, they found out that people that have a best friend at work are 7 times more likely to be engaged in their jobs. But it doesn't have to be like a best friend forever. It doesn't have to be those friends that lifelong friends that you've had outside of work. This is your best work friend. It's that place where when you go to work, you're happy to see them. They make it a happy, makes you happy to be with them. It's what's more good. It's like that person that we just are so excited to see and enjoy having lunch with and that kind of thing. So that work friend doesn't have to be an outside friend, but it's definitely your inside work friend. Then these other things to think about is that human beings are naturally social creatures. We are. And so from that perspective, we need our relationships. Work is an interdependent, it is a socially based construct. And so understanding that we need those healthy relationships is another way of thinking about why these relationships are important. And then the only other thing I was going to say is that the more comfortable our coworkers are around one another, whether our comfort with our coworkers or their coworkers with us, we can be more confident when we're voicing our opinions and brainstorming. And having that professional circle will help us to develop in our career. It opens up opportunities that otherwise might pass us by. So the relationships that in work not only help us in understanding what our purpose, direction, and goals are at work, are all encompassed by how these relationships work at work. Sorry, sometimes a little better at this than others. Okay, there we go. Let's talk about the North Star. So we have mentioned this in everyone, and we want this to be like the idea that kind of like pulls all of these relationships together. So understanding what your North Star is, and for those of you all are joining us for the first time, our North Star is also called the Polaris, and it's that famous star that nearly holds still in the sky while the northern lights kind of circle around it. So if you think about metaphorically what our North Star is, it's that fixed destination, that place that you are going to that helps you and that you can depend on in life as the world changes around you. This is who I am. This is what's important to me. And as life changes, that value or that North Star is not going to change very much. So at work, what are these North Stars look like? So here's some questions to help you think about what your North Star looks like at work. So what role or purpose does work play in my adult life? So, I often say, are you working, do you live to work or do you work to live? Right? So is work something where it's a career, a vocation, or a calling where you live to work? Or is it the way you pay your bills and finance all the other important things in your life, right? So, what is the role or purpose does work play in my adult life? And then, what is the purpose? Sorry. What is the purpose of the work? What is the purpose actually of the work that we do? Like, what is the mission of the agency or the university or the team that you're on? Why is that function important? What is the purpose of that work? How do my values influence my work relationships? Like I mentioned just a minute ago, it's like our values, our personal core values, intersect with the values of the core values of our workplace, but also of our work relationships. What do I consider a healthy, satisfying work relationship? What do I want out of my work relationships? People have very different ideas about a work relationship, what a work relationship is, and how they approach that. So understanding that, all of our relationships are a little bit different. It helps us to understand like what's important to us and why we do what we do. And then I really want to challenge you to think about what kind of coworker or colleague do I want to be? So we often think in terms of like, I want, what kind of person I want to be friends with, what kind of people I want to work with, but who do I want to be? What kind of person do I want to be seen as a coworker and colleague? So these are ways to kind of really dig in and figure out what that North Star is for you. Okay, so let's define, before we go any farther, let's just define what types of relationships we may or may not have at work. The first one here is coworkers, and these are the most impersonal relationships. These might be the people that are part of your department, but not necessarily on your team. They may be the people that you see crossing campus or that you may occasionally be in a committee meeting with, but that you don't see them on a day-to-day basis. And you're friendly, there's pleasantries, but there's not much depth to that relationship. They're your coworkers, your colleagues. At UK, we have 25,000 or something coworkers, but we're really just close to our team members, which is the next type of relationship I wanted to kind of highlight. This is your team. This is your core group of people that you work for. You see them, you interact with them on a regular basis, you plan and implement the work together. So, for example, if you're a hospital nurse, you may have a whole slew of other nurses that are coworkers with you, but the other nurses on your team or the other healthcare professionals that you work with on your shift, those are your actual team members. And that might switch a little bit from one shift to another, but overall, your team member is pretty stable. Your team members are pretty stable. Then we have work friends. And work friends are the folks you interact with socially at the office. These could be the people you go to lunch with, you take a walk with, maybe you walk back and forth to the parking lot with at night. And every now and then you might even actually meet with them outside of work, but that's still an interpersonal relationship that's work based, and it helps you stay sane during the daily grind. I mean, we are at work, some of us 40 hours a week, some of us 32 hours a week, some of us 36-hour a week. However long we're at work, that is a long time to spend with somebody. And if you're going to spend 40 hours of a work week with folks, you really want to have the opportunity to have these people that you're really excited to see, that you can interact with, and it's not just sitting at a computer or just trying to get through the workday. These are the people that make us feel sane at work. The next type of relationship I want to talk about is mentor mentee. This is still a very professional based relationship. Okay. A mentor helps you to figure out where you're going. They give you career advice. They help you navigate at work. They help you to advance in your career, and they can lead to referrals or roles or promotions. So you're still in a professional relationship. Often it's a work-based relationship, meaning you don't see each other outside of work very often. It very much is about the your professional development. Of course, we have manager and direct reports. Everybody has a manager, a supervisor, a director, somebody that they report to. And I will say that a lot of the research that we've been doing around this shows that a manager has more influence on our mental health than anybody else in our lives, even our family members, even our friends. And the reason is for that is, first of all, we spend so much time with them. Our self-esteem and our worth at work is based on how they treat us and how they help us grow. And they have a lot of control over our work lives. And so knowing, like, having a manager who is supportive of you and helps you to think about how you approach your work and provide you with the tools and the skills that you need to do your job, that manager is going to help you feel better about your mental health. But someone who maybe is not as good at communicating or does not provide you that support you need, or sometimes is downright just difficult to work with, it's going to make your life at work pretty miserable. So this manager direct reports at work is also a relationship to consider. The next level I want to talk about is our work spouse. And everybody, this is my work wife, this is my work husband. But this office spouse is really this person that you spend a significant amount of time with at work. Like, they're your work best friend. Back to that ideal of having a best friend at work. They keep you sane while you're at work. They may help make sure that you get things done on time. They remind you about deadlines. They're in it with you. They might be the person that you rely on to make sure that you stop and have a lunch break. They're the person that you're the closest with, and you trust them enough to openly vent, because we all need places where we vent. And we're going to talk about venting and gossiping here in a minute, but this is the person that you trust enough to go and say, this is driving me crazy. I really just need to talk about it for a minute. I just need to vent, and then I'll be fine. This is a person you trust that it's not going to go any farther than that. And you can ask them for advice and direction on how to approach things that are difficult in the workplace. Then there's your life friend. A life friend is the most intimate relationship you can have at work. You don't have to, it doesn't even have to be somebody that you met at work, and it's not even specific to the work. This is a person who transcends the work relationship. You have a relationship outside of work with them. They are part of your family friend group. They're integral to your life. And you get to see this person regularly, which is such a privilege if you work with them. But, they're also not just about the work with you. They're that really people that kind of transcend that. In my work, almost all of my really best friends are either work adjacent or former coworkers, because that's where we did the work, right? And as a social worker, the work is everything. And so when you bond around that and you build those coalition relationships around that, they become the people that kind of come with you after you leave a position, or that you grow a relationship outside of work with. So these are just some of the relationships to kind of keep in mind as we move forward that we're talking about. Okay. So before we go any farther, let's talk about what is a healthy work relationship. And there are some different specific aspects that makes a healthy relationship of any kind, but definitely when you're thinking about work, and that's trust, respect, inclusion, and open communication. So trust is when you can trust your team members that they're going to be open and honest with you about their thoughts and actions. You don't have to waste time or energy watching your back. We've all worked with that person that we know we can't tell them anything because it's going to get repeated, or that it's going to be taken out of context, or they're going to take credit for. This is not what we're talking about. We're talking about those people who actually build you up, that are in it with you, that you feel like you can trust, and that way the work is not about avoiding negative, but actually embracing the positives of work. Then there's respect. This is that mutual respect where you value each other's input, and you also look for ways to find insight and wisdom and creativity as you build through the work. There's solutions there when you have respect. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about respect. With inclusion, this is not just about having a diverse team. This is not about diverse people or even diverse opinions, but in accepting it, like being accepting of diversity. This is actually welcoming it. When we welcome inclusion, we actually have a culture add to our team. When we are open to other insights and perspectives, when we can see, when we can hear and offer different opinions, it actually adds to the culture of our team and it improves the work. So this is important. Inclusion is important from that perspective. It also helps inform your decision making from a perspective that's greater than yourself. And then finally, open communication. Obviously, communication is everything in every relationship, but all good relationships depend on that open and honest communication. And this can happen in emails, direct messages, meeting face to face, on a video call. The more effectively you communicate with those around you, the better you'll connect with them. Communication is a pillar of definitely of good relationships. So let's talk a little bit about how we grow these relationships. What actually helps to foster, nurture, and grow good work relationships in the workplace? The first is identifying your relationship needs, which we kind of alluded to when we talked about the North Star pieces. What do you need in your work relationship? What is important to you at work? What are the things that you need? Then developing your people skills, because again, relationships are not just about what have you done for me lately, but it's also what you yourself put into them. And so, what are your people skills? What are you good at collaborating and communicating and dealing with conflict? So, learning and beefing up those and really practicing those helps you to have better people skills, which helps you to have better those good communication, trust in those relationships. Focusing on your EI, or emotional intelligence. And I'm actually going to come back to that here in a minute. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on that. But emotional intelligence is your ability to recognize your own emotions and better understand what they're telling you. It also helps when we develop our own emotional intelligence, we become more adept at identifying and handling the emotions and needs of others. So when I'm aware of myself, I become more aware of others. This next one is practicing mindful listening. We have talked about active listening and reflective listening. This is what we're talking about here. When people feel heard, they're more likely to listen to you. It is a much better place to come from when we are listening, we're reflecting back, we're summarizing what they're saying, we're seeking for understanding, we're really honing in. It makes you feel more trusted and trustworthy when we are listened to. Scheduling time to build relationships. Last session, we talked about bids for communication, bids for connection, but it's also about actually intentionally trying to build relationships. Some of us can organically just be that social butterfly that flits around and makes friends with people, and other of us actually have to put effort into it. I'm one of those people. Like, I like people, I enjoy people, I love getting to know people, but I'm not one that puts myself out there. So when I'm in a new situation or I want to build relationships, I actually have to make an intention to do that. And it may be that I make sure that at least once a day I stop by a coworker's office and say hello and ask them how their day's going. It might be that I'm like, hey, just want to have a cup of coffee and chat for 5 minutes and take a break. It could be anything like that that helps me to build that relationship, that's spending time with somebody and actually investing into that relationship. Managing your boundaries is also really important. And I, for some reason, left that off here. But we have to make time for setting those boundaries. And sometimes it can really impair our ability to work with people when we aren't setting those boundaries. But we will be talking about boundaries in a minute. The next one is appreciating others. you know, therapist talks about attitude of gratitude all the time, but gratitude is actually not only helps somebody else feel good, but it also makes us feel good. When we are thinking about what we are grateful for, what's important to us, but also showing people appreciation, it builds relationships. I feel important to you. I feel valued by you. And these can be genuine compliments, but it's also just good people skills to say, hey, thank you so much for grabbing that stuff off the printer for me. I always forget that and I leave it and then I forget if I've even printed it again. And you just taking the time to pull that off the printer and bring it to me. That was awesome. Thank you so much. It can just be something little. It doesn't have to be some grand thing that they've done for you to show appreciation for it. Being positive, um, when we are positive, when we feel good about ourselves, when we're putting that positivity out in the world, it actually is contagious. When you want to be around people who make you feel good, that make you feel positive about things, who are fun to be around, and so people will naturally gravitate to people who are positive. So when we practice positivity and being positive, we will actually develop those relationships. And then the last one on here about growing good co-work relationships is avoiding gossip. So thinking about it from that perspective, gossip can be very contagious, just like positivity. So it's really easy to start complaining about things, talking about people, figuring out can you believe they did that? Can you believe they said that? Here we go again. And I'm just tell you, just as guilty as anybody else of doing that at times, but being aware of it and helping yourself rein back from that and not it being the cornerstone of your relationship with somebody, that shouldn't be all that your relationship be about is gossiping. Also, it brings down that positive relationship, that positive attitude and atmosphere you're trying to build at work. When you start building cliques and us against them, gossiping is just very much destructive to relationships. So let's talk a little bit more about these four pillars of emotional intelligence. So some of you all might be more familiar with this concept than others, but self-awareness. So these four pillars, you can look at different types of I've seen different versions of these four pillars, but I like this one because it's pretty clear and concrete. So I wanted to use this perspective of it. So, but the ones that you might be familiar with might be just a little bit different because honestly, they're four pillars, but some of these overlap, right? So they look a little bit different depending on that. So again, if we're talking about our ability to recognize our own emotions and better understand what they're telling us, but also developing our ability to understand and being adept at identifying emotions in others and what their needs are, that's what we're talking about with emotional intelligence. So the first pillar is self-awareness. Do I recognize my emotions? Do I understand how they influence my actions? If I'm feeling defensive, does that make me go on the offense? If I'm feeling defensive, does it make me shut down? How does it influence my actions? And then finding out what are some strategies I can do to help myself when I know that that's a pressure or a pain point, that when I feel attacked, I'm going to start being defensive. I might shut down. And so what do I say to myself? Like self-compassion wise, but also what do I say to that person? Be like, I know this is something I need to hear right now, but I'm just going to need the time to really think about it. And then can I come and meet with you and we can talk about this further because I feel really uncomfortable about it right now. It could be whatever that is that you need in order to make yourself feel safe in that moment. But that self-awareness is what's important for this pillar. The other part of this next pillar is empathy. And empathy is understanding other people's emotions. It's more than just going, oh, I'm so sorry. That sounds so bad. This is actually going, gosh, I get that. I could see how in that situation, that's how I would feel too. It's about offering comfort and support. What can I do for you right now? I know this is so hard for you. What can I do to support you in this moment? That's empathy. Regulation, that's managing our emotions in healthy ways. Back to that self-awareness. If I recognize my emotions, I understand how they influence my actions. How am I going to regulate in those moments of pain? How am I going to regulate my emotions in order to feel like that I can have a a productive conversation, or that this, for whatever I'm feeling, can be handled in an appropriate way. It's also about adapting to changing circumstances. And boy, nobody likes change. We just don't. But, if anybody says they embrace change wholeheartedly, you might need to talk to them about that, because change is very difficult. We love routine. Humans love routine. Babies love routine. Children love routine. Adults love routine. And so when we think about changing circumstances, changes in our patterns of behavior throughout the day, or even, where we sit in our office, that can be really hard. But guess what's also true? Change is inevitable, right? Like, it just, when you get comfortable there and with a process or a way that we do things, well, it's time to change it again, or we're tweaking it, or let's go in this direction. We've been working this way and this is so important, but now this over here is important, so just leave that on the back burner and move along. Or it could be simple as they keep telling us our building is going to change and that we're getting ready to move, and then they tell us it's going to be March and now it's June, and we are all in this moment of uncertainty, and I just can't deal with it anymore. It's hard enough that they're making me move buildings. Now they won't even tell me when it's going to happen. So understanding and being able to adapt to changing circumstances helps you to regulate your emotions and manage them in a healthy way. This last pillar is social skills. That's how we build and maintain relationships and communicate effectively. And we've talked a lot about this one in all of the 4 sessions, and we're going to talk a little bit more about communication here in a minute. But if you can really kind of work, if you're going to think about something that helps you as somebody in a relationship, being a good friend, being a good coworker, being a good partner, if you can learn to understand your emotional intelligence and maximize on it and build from that, and really hone in on the things that you might need to work on, these pillars are going to actually really benefit you with that. Okay, communication tools. We talked about practicing active and reflective listening. And when we talked about friendships, we talked about making time and honoring bids for connection. When we talked about intimate relationships, we've talked about, collaborative skills. Today, I wanted to really focus on, and we've already talked about avoiding gossiping, and we will definitely continue that as we go along. But what I really want us to spend some time thinking about is the art of saying no. Because at work, we are always trying to figure out what we have a finite amount of time to work, finite time of emotional ability, finite amount of, of ability to do things, time, energy, all of those things. And so saying no and being comfortable saying no becomes one of the major communication tools in any relationship, but particularly at work. So there's actually a book called The Art of Saying No. And so that's where I stole that from. But I want to think about why we say no. So if we can, and I know saying no is a boundary, and we are going to definitely talk about boundaries, but why I chose it as our communication skill is because we know it's a boundary, we know it needs to be set, but how do we do it? So that is where it becomes a communication tool. So think, first of all, why do we need to learn how to say no? Again, we only have so much of us to give. But also, when we don't say no, we are saying yes. Either we are actually saying yes, or we are saying yes by default. And when we say yes to something, you are saying no to something else. Again, there's only so much of you to go around. So either you're going to say no to something explicitly by saying, this is the thing I'm not going to be able to do if I do this thing I'm saying yes to. Or it might be that I say yes because I don't have boundaries even within myself, and then I start dropping balls and things are not going to get done because there is really only one of you. So when you think about it, if you take on something new, what are you going to stop doing? Right? So this is the goals around why we say no. And then determine what is important to you and why do you value it. It's also thinking about saying no as a negotiation communication skill as well. So when you're asked to do something, it can also lead you can also think about, well, I can be responsible for getting this done, but I could also use delegation. So I might say, sure, I'm happy to be the person that takes the lead on this, but I'm going to need help doing it. So, and thinking about who can I delegate this to, but also those other tasks and priorities on my list. Are there things I can delegate that maybe I don't need to be the person that does them, so that I can take on this next task that I'm being asked to do, this next request? And what about those other things on your plate? Can you delegate again? Can you eliminate them? Because I will tell you that as coworkers and the way we work, we tend to have preferences about the way we do our work, but they're not actual expectations or necessities. And so when you're trying to figure out whether or not you can say no or yes to something, you also have to decide, are there things that maybe I can eliminate about the way I do my work that will give me more time and energy to do this new thing? And then there is asking yourself, when you're negotiating, is there things that can wait? So is this a lower priority or a higher priority? And that's definitely something that you can trust if you have a good relationship with your manager, that they can help you to do. Figure out your priorities. I need you to take on this project. Okay, help me think about what these other things that I'm working on, which of these things do you want me to back burner and deprioritize in order to make this a priority now? And so that's, can we delegate it? Can we eliminate it? Can it wait? Those are things that we ask ourselves before we say yes. But let's talk about how to say no. So, how to say no at work. So, these are some things to think about, just big picture. So, when someone asks you to do something, ask for time to think about it. This might seem like an obvious thing to do, but we are terrible at it, most of us. So when somebody says, "Hey, I need you to do X, Y, and Z," you're put on the spot. You feel obligated to be sure. I'm a good team member. I'm a good team player. I want to be helpful, and so the automatically, okay, sure, I can do that. Or maybe in a minute, can you give me a second? But you can actually just be like, "Hey, whew, I need a second to think about that. Can I get back to you in a little bit?" Or I'm really focused on this other thing right now, and I just need a moment to think about that. Just ask for time to think about it. Go away and come back. Can I get back to you in the morning about this? Like giving yourself some time, because not only is it that you might already know that you need to say no to it, but you want to be kind about the way you say no and the way you approach saying no. So it just gives you time to think about how you want to do that. The thing is, though, you've got to close that circle. So you can't just say, can you give me some time to think about it and then never go back? Because that's not, they're just going to keep coming and asking, and you're going to keep shutting down and try to avoid them, because avoiding is not a good communication or conflict tactic skill. Be honest, uh, but don't apologize. I'm so sorry I can't do that right now, or oh, I wish I could. We say things like that, and it's not. It's okay to just be like, I am not available to do that right now. I understand that's important. You can say things like that. Don't overly justify. You don't have to explain to them how, because you have, it takes you 25 minutes to walk from one side of campus to the other, and then you have to walk back, that you can't have time to do that 2-hour presentation and still get back for this other thing. You could try, you might get that, but you don't want to overly justify it. Well, and I might need a glass of water, and there might be, I don't know what shoes I'm going to be wearing that day. I mean, we can get really bogged down in that justification of that no. And so making sure that you're not overly justifying it, just delivering the no. Add an encouragement at the end. I realize this is really important to you. Thank you for thinking about me for this. I really hope that you'll all ask me to do it again in the future. Something that's saying that, and that which goes into this other one, which is this a no for now or a no forever? Is this a hard no? It's a boundary that you're not willing to violate. It's not something you're willing to do. Or is this no for now because I don't have time for it? And clarifying that for them as well. And then the thing I think we all get kind of stuck on is that when we say no to somebody, we are afraid we're going to hurt their feelings or they're going to react poorly. So don't try to control how the other person will react. You can overscript something. You can try to say it the most perfect way, and that person could still be very upset about it or hurt by it or angry at you. But we are not that powerful. We are not powerful enough to control how another person's going to react. Saying no is about you, not them. So some examples. Some things to start with would be like, I'd love to, but, and then something like, that's not something I can fit into my schedule right now. Or I wish I could, but I won't be able to do or make it. Thanks so much for thinking of me. However, I'm working on other projects right now. I'm honored you asked for my help, but that doesn't sound like a good fit for me. That sounds interesting. The only issue is I'm stepping away from those kinds of projects so I can focus on XYZ. Yes, I understand that's important. This is a place where you could ask for help prioritizing, but I've already committed to this week and I can't take on more. Or with a supervisor, honestly, I will say that I I read a book like 20 years ago called "In Getting to Yes," and my clients who've met with me know I tell this story a lot. But the only thing I remember about that book is it talked about how we really like to be told yes. And so when you start a sentence out with yes, you can actually deliver the no a little bit softer because people are already feeling heard. Yes, I understand that's important. However, I have these things also on my plate. Can you help me to figure out what I should put down in order to take this on? So that it's that, saying yes actually says, I'm hearing you. I understand this is important, but let me tell you why that might not be what I can do right now. So that's another a little tip for you about how to say yes. No is to start with yes. Okay, switching gears. So let's talk a little bit more about boundaries. This is a slide we've used in all of our trainings about boundaries. And so it talks about what boundaries are, particularly about how when we set boundaries and the types of boundaries we use, time, material, physical, emotional, and intellectual and sexual are some of those types, what the purpose of boundaries are, create trust and safety, and how to set boundaries. So I want to talk about this ideal of trust and how we can use trust to determine where our boundaries should be and what types of relationships and who are in different levels of trust. So this is an illustration called the circle of trust. If you go on and online and you Google the circle of trust, you're going to get different versions of this. There's even one that has like 7 levels that I really liked, but for time purposes and also not to get bogged down in this topic, I really decided to kind of like set that one aside. I did put in the resources that you'll get at the end a link to this specific circle of trust and a worksheet that helps you think about how you want to approach this. But let's talk about what we're talking about here with the circle of trust. So, have any of you all ever seen the movie Meet the Fockers? So that's a movie that was about a man who was meeting his future in-laws. He just had proposed to his girlfriend. He's meeting his new father-in-law, who happens to be Robert De Niro. And so, and Robert De Niro in this character, he used to be a CIA agent. So he's really covert about everything. And he always talks about the circle of trust. And he's always saying, you're in the circle or you're not in the circle of trust. Are you in or are you out of the circle of trust? Well, the circle of trust has different levels. So some people can be in or out of different levels of the circle of trust at different times. But let's talk about why it's important to understand the circle of trust, because it's good at helping us visualize our boundaries. It's different. It helps us to define what different relationships are based on our level of trust in that relationship. So figuring out who's in your circle helps you to define what boundaries you need for each of those individuals, but also what boundaries apply to those different circles. So how do you determine who's in what circle? So this goes back to our boundaries. So characteristics of the relationship determine which level of trust that somebody is in. And that can determine, and depending on the relationship, types of trust you have to consider when you're deciding which level somebody belongs to is what physical boundaries do you want to set? What emotional boundaries? What intellectual boundaries do you want to set? Sexual boundaries, but also how much information you want to be shared with or by them or with them that you want to share to them, and then how much time and energy we want to give to that relationship. That can kind of determines what level or circle of trust someone is in. So if you start looking at this from the beginning, it's in the middle is you, right? You are the center of the circle. The next circle outside of that, these are people in the inner circle. These are people that you trust. You feel you can let them into your life more. They're more likely your romantic partners. Their safe family members, your close friends. They're the ones that have more physical, have more intimate relationships with them. They are more. You have more emotional. Vulnerability with. These are the people that you trust the most. Your middle circle are people in this circle that are supportive and you can trust them, but your relationship isn't as intimate, or these are, these are your friends and your relatives. So from a work perspective, this middle circle could be your work friends, and your maybe your work spouse or even your life friends at work, right? This is or your life friends might be more of an inner circle, but these are the people in the middle. Then in the outer circle are people that you're friendly with. Often I will talk about our friendlies. We have people that we or don't really have a relationship with, but we're friendly with. We say, hello, Stan, how are you today? You know, like that old cartoon, Looney Tunes cartoon where the shepherd dogs are clocking in and clocking out, and they just say hi and bye to each other. These are your outer circle people, right? You're nice to them. You want to keep, they're part of your life, but they're not your intimate friends. They're also, they might be the professionals who help you. They're your acquaintances. These relationships also tend to be kind of transactional. For example, you know, somebody who cuts your hair. My stylist, I've been going to him for 20 years. I consider him a friend, but he's probably still an outer circle friend, right? Because I see him once every 6 weeks when he cuts my hair, but I've seen him once every 6 weeks for 20 years. So we have a pretty good, you know, relationship. We know parts of each other's life, but not all of each other's lives. And it's definitely still about me getting my hair cut and paying him for it, right? So these are people that can be good friends, but in that situation. And a lot of work friends tend to be good friends in the workplace. So what decides, not only do you help boundaries help you decide who belongs in which circle, but it also, as a reminder, not everybody belongs in any of these circles. So this is when you can have people who you don't trust at all. And you being aware of that, who deserves your time and your energy, who isn't, you know, who are you going to share information with? And some people you may be like, these people don't even belong in that outer circle. They're out there in outer space. They're people that I'm guarded against. They're people I don't share information with. There are people that I don't trust. They definitely exist too. But within the circle are people that you have some sort of actual relationship with. People move in between these circles for different reasons. Life and circumstances. As you get to know people, maybe they're middle circle people and they become inner circle people, or maybe somebody breaks your trust and they go from inner all the way to outer circle. Like you're still friendly to them, but you're not going to let them into your heart and and let them really know you anymore because they've broken your trust. So it's just a way to kind of think about where am I in my boundaries and circle of trust. Okay. So what are some pitfalls of work friends? So just very quickly, if you think about work friends, we might be friends, but my coworker wants a different level of connection than I do. So I might like to be really good work friends. I like to talk to them at work, have lunch with them, maybe share pictures of our family and our dogs, tell them jokes, but I don't want a relationship with them outside of work. But my coworker really wants to take it to that more outside of work friends level. So so that's one of those things where you have to figure out like how are you going to navigate that? And just being again back to honesty, like, I really enjoy your company, but I really prioritize my time outside of work for my family. Thinking about what you might say when that comes up. Trauma bonding and trauma bonding. So trauma bonding happens when when somebody maybe they broke up with their boyfriend, they're coming to work every day and they're crying and they're just dumping, dumping on you, right? And so you want to be supportive of them, but it's just a lot to have it happen day after day after day. So that's when you start thinking about like, how do I minimize my amount of time with that? I still want to be supportive, but I don't want to have this open door policy of someone coming in and just dumping their policy on me, or their trauma on me. I also want to think about this we can also bomb and bond at the same time. So if we are working in a environment where there's a lot going on and it's really difficult for us and we're struggling, we might bond over the trauma of that workplace. Some of you might have lifelong friends who are trauma bonds that started out as trauma bonds, but they've transcended that. But so we spend all of our time together at work, either bombing each other with, can you believe that? La, 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 or bonding. We're in this together. I can't believe this is happening to us. This is so bad. And all we talk about is negative, 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 right? Talking about only work outside of work. So this is definitely a boundary that you want to set if you want to raise that relationship to a different level, because you don't want to go to dinner, go meet somebody for drinks, go to a picnic or do something with them outside of work. And all you do is sit there and talk about work. Right. So you might even set it like, I have lots of work friends. And so it might be something like, we're going to talk about work for 10 minutes because we got to get it out of our system, but then we're not going to talk about work again at all during our time together. So this next one is about assumptions about what can be shared about you or by you. Like sometimes we think when somebody tells us something at work, or we tell somebody, or somebody, when we tell somebody else something at work, they may think, well, you're telling me, so it might be okay for me to share it with the whole office. Or because you told me this, I think it must be open season because I wouldn't, it doesn't occur to me that you're trusting me with that, right? Because you just think, well, why would you tell me this if it wasn't something you're telling the whole office? So making sure that you're checking that out, making sure that you're saying, is this something that you're talking to other people about, or is this something you want me to keep as a secret? And also being clear to them. Back to gossiping. When we're talking about other coworkers, it makes us feel insular. It makes us feel, in some ways, it's back to trauma bombing and trauma bonding. But what happens is that we start treating people negatively because we're gossiping about them, and all we're thinking about them is negatively. Power dynamics, that's that whole idea of being friends with your supervisor or your supervisor being friends with you. How are you going to navigate those power dynamics? And then toxic relationships, where we let people in a little bit more than we anticipated, and they don't respect our boundaries, or they become insulting or condescending. And so we might have started out feeling like friends, but now we know this relationship is toxic and boundaries have to be put into place. All right. So, thinking about conflict, when we think about work conflict, there tends to be a couple of types. The first one is that personality conflict or disagreement between individuals. This is, it's very common. On any given day, it could be any two of you. But these conflicts are impossible to avoid because we're different people. So someday, someday we're gonna like feel good about things, and somebody might make a joke about my hair, and I'll laugh. And the next day, I might feel, kind of bad about myself, or I haven't slept last night. Same person, same joke, and I am so angry at them. And so it's not only it's misunderstandings, but it's also about knowing like where the disagreements are, where the boundaries are. But personality, they can be really challenging and frustrating. So learning to like navigate those can, like don't let them sit by themselves. Make sure that you're addressing them. Don't let them become frenemies kinds of issues. Like we want to address personality conflicts because as quickly as they happen. Interdependent task-based conflicts tend to be unit-based. Like they're like, I have a new employee starting. They're here for their first day, and the person that was supposed to make sure that their computer was set up, they didn't do it, and now I have to fight them to get it set up, and now a person doesn't have it, and now we're at odds, and it's like here we go again, dealing with that department. They never follow through on the things they're going to do. So this is like interdependence of task. We have a task that we have to do together, but the conflict is that I can't count on you to always to follow through on that. Style-based conflicts are differences in style for work. And I want to say that this one happens a whole lot because we have expectations for ourselves and who we are at work and how we do the work. And then we think because other people don't do it the same way that we do, that they're wrong or it's not the right way to do it. And so we don't make room for it so it's like the idea of like, does it matter if we get from point A to point B, or does the journey between A and B matter? Right. And so if I have a style-based conflict, I might be so focused on how we're doing it instead of the outcome. And so oftentimes figuring out, is it the style-based conflict because the work's not getting done, or it's just a difference in how I think the work should be done. And then leadership style conflicts. This is, making sure that your employees understand how you approach the work, how you approach being a leader, what your expectations of them are as a man, they can expect from you, and what you can expect from them as as their manager. It's also addressing issues about like understanding people's styles of conflict negotiation and management, and what their strengths are, what their challenges are. As a leader, it's your responsibility to kind of figure that out, because how you communicate and grow one employee is not necessarily the way we communicate and grow another employee. So making sure that they understand how you work, but also figuring out ways to work with them so that it works for them and their style as well. Okay. Managing conflict. So we could spend 2 hours on this. But but I wanted to give you kind of a framework of how to think about managing conflict. Conflict happens in the workplace. How am I going to address it? I want to start out by saying these are what you do when it's safe and appropriate to do. Not every conflict is something that you can safely and appropriately address on your own between two people showing mutual respect to each other and addressing a conflict. Some things can be damaging, some things can be hurtful, and you might need to get that help and support. You might have to have a third party there to be there when you're talking. You might need a negotiator. But generally speaking, day-to-day conflicts, how to manage that conflict. So obviously that you got to start off with talking with the person, but it's not just going, hey, I want to talk to you about something. You might say something like, hey, I really have something I want to talk to you about. Is there a good time for us to talk? Or and like maybe we could meet, off campus, or we could meet in an office with the door closed, with and like if not in the library with where everybody can see us, where you're not being interrupted, where you have a place of privacy and a place that you can talk. Then when you actually talk about the conflict, when you're talking about what it is that you're worried about or concerned about, or the conflict you want to address, focus on what happened, not when, it's not say when this happened, not when you did this, right? Because you is fighting words. When you start a sentence out with you do this, you do that, that automatically makes us feel defensive. So you want to focus on the behavior, the action, the event, not on the person, and give specific instances. You always are late. You never are on time for my meetings, but you get here on time for everybody else's meetings. Give a specific instance. I was really counting on you being on time to our last meeting. We had a lot to cover. I felt like we wasted time that we could have been using for that, and now we're going to have to use another meeting. So I really want to ask you, would you please be on time in the future for meetings? Give specific instances, not personalities. Listen carefully. Pay attention to what they're saying, not what you're going to say in response. This is an active and reflective listening piece that we've talked about a couple of times already. You want to be listening and not thinking about what you're going to say about what they're saying. So avoid interrupting. When it is your time to talk, before you have your response, make sure you understand what it is that they're trying to tell you. Summarize back to them. So what I'm hearing is, or paraphrase, so you're saying this, you're actually telling them back, I am listening to you and this is what I heard. And then question to clarify your understanding. Am I understanding where you're coming from? Is this what you're trying to say to me? So you want to make sure that you both understand what you're actually talking about by using active and reflective listening. And then what are the disagree and agree and disagree points? Because there's a conflict here. This is not, sometimes it's a misunderstanding, but most of the time there's a conflict point. There are places where you're going to agree and places you're going to disagree. So some of those are going to be things like maybe we need to avoid working on these kinds of things in the future together because, this is a disagreement point for our values or the way that we approach our work. No hard feelings. Or it might be an agreement point where it's like we can agree that this is what's important to us and we can modify that until we both agree about how we're going to move ahead. Once you've identified what those areas of conflict are, they might be more than one. So it might be that they're late to the meeting, but the real conflict as you go through here is just feeling disrespected and unheard. It could be other things that are conflict points as well. So if there are more than one, which one are you going to work on first? Which one is important to both of you to resolve? Develop that plan and have close the loop by including a time to meet again, and then follow through. If you've agreed to work on something with somebody, hold up your end of the stick. Make sure you stay solution focused, but you also need to give it time to work. I think sometimes we think we're going to have these one-off conversations, everybody's on the same page, and then something similar happens and they're like, oh, here we are back to square one. But sometimes people need a little bit of time to change a behavior. So give it time to work. Don't look for the where it's proving you, but look for the exceptions. Look for the exceptions to the time. Look for them doing things well or doing things that work for you, not when you don't always look for the things that aren't working for you. All right. That was a lot in a very short period of time. So I want to end up with just this ideal of intention. So this is my take-home message to you. I really think it applies to all of our relationships, a series that we've talked about. The power of intention. When we do things out of intentionality, when we make an intention, when we are thoughtful, mindful, and we do things not just mindlessly. When we have intention, we actually are, it's a very powerful place to come from. When you're clear on your intentions, you take inspired action that's in alignment with your words and your truth. So, doing what I say, saying what I do, walking the walk, talking the talk. I'm actually making a choice about the relationships that I want to have. I'm making a choice about who I share things with and who I don't share with. I am aware of my boundaries. They're fluid enough that I can make changes when I need to. But that's what I'm talking about when I say intention. But what you find is that when you do things with intention, you're actually going to find that you manifest what you desire because you're clearly putting out words and actions that are in alignment with your core values and with the things you want to attract into your life. What we put out there is hopefully what we bring back in. So I hope that you guys will go forth with intention. And I'm going to now turn it over to Rhonda, who is going to talk about our resources and a few final thoughts.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kim. It was a great chunk of information. I know it's a lot to cover in a short amount of time. So because of that, with each of these sessions, we've really tried to put together a robust resource page. And on this one, you're going to see some combination of articles on the left-hand side, various kind of aspects that we've sort of touched on in the program today, as well as some other things you might want to explore in a little more detail. Up at the top, you'll see that core values, living into our values exercise. I think, if that part is appealing to you, if you notice and are starting to kind of draw those connections yourself with, who do I want to be? What kind of worker do I employee do I want to be? What kind of partner do I want to be? What kind of friend do I want to be? Really thinking about doing some of that values work is just a good foundational piece to kind of explore some of these other aspects that you might be running into. With the work relationships in particular, I found some podcast episodes. There are fewer entire podcast shows kind of devoted to that. In the past, I had some ones devoted to romantic relationships. The entire show was that. These are just some episodes, so different shows and different points of view. I would encourage you to really check those out. It doesn't mean we have to agree with everything we're hearing, but I think podcasts are a really good way to get more points of view, other kind of ways of looking at maybe an issue we're running into, and then some books if you're wanting to dive into some aspects of this in a little bit more depth. Okay, next slide. And then this is our core team of therapists. We are all the therapists that work in the health and wellness program. And so feel free to meet with any of us if you're wanting to talk through any of these kind of issues one-on-one. You'll see Ann and Eric are our other two colleagues that are not here with us today. Next slide. And just that reminder that all employees as well as sponsor dependents are eligible for services through our office. So if this relationship series has stirred up some things that you think, you want to dig into a little bit, maybe explore a little bit more, or, develop some skills in a certain area, consider setting up an appointment with one of us or one of the other resources we've listed on the side there. So there's the IRAFT clinic, and I'll let you explore their website, but they definitely touch on issues related to family, couples, and individual services. We've got elder care resources. We also have just our general health and wellness resources that you'll see at the very bottom, which also has some of our coaches and different folks there. So really check out resources. I think that's one of those great things that we know that we've got access to at UK. And so this is a good opportunity to maybe tap into some of those that you've been curious about, but not connected to before. And then final slide. We just want to thank you all again for being here with us. We will be sending out the slides from the PowerPoint, so you'll get those in the next day or two. And then we're going to be posting videos from all four of the sessions in the series and putting those up. And we'll also be communicating that out to folks who signed up for this as well. So if you feel like it's beneficial, go back, check those out. And then hopefully, you can continue to look for offerings from us. We may have some other one-off things we do around this later in the year. And like I said, feel free to check out our services and come in and meet with us if that's useful. Thank you all very much. Kim, anything you want to add in our last minute? Oh, you're muted. Oh, you're muted. There you go.
Of course, I'm muted. I just want to say thank you too. I think this is a labor of love for us, and so we are really, grateful for you all being interested and invested. Particularly all of you that came to all four sessions. That means a lot to us. So thank you so much, and I hope we see you again in the future.
Yeah. Take care, guys. Thank you all very much.